I would like to call to order the work session for the CRA. It is now 10:40, and thank you all for being in attendance. And Mr. Rue, do you want to, the only item on the agenda is Broadway Mixed-Use District Planning and Strategy, so do you want to kick this off, please, sir?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
The CRA is about to brief this board on our Broadway strategy, and the goal of our strategy for Broadway is really to establish a significant project that will have that sort of catalytic change to the corridor. It's no surprise that addressing Broadway and just raising its profile has become a strategic priority of the City Commission, this board, the CRA Advisory Board, which has mentioned that it would like to see it become, if not one of the most important areas of the CRA's work plan, and then of course our local residents as well. So today, as we present this strategy, we're looking for your direction and input on this strategy as it relates to specific items that involve zoning, specific sections of Broadway. These are just areas that I would like board members to just sort of keep in mind, as well as any other needs that you would like to see the CRA sort of help and address as we redevelop the corridor. The street has a plan so far, so as you know, FDOT has a plan to address the actual road itself. So now we're really looking at all the other sections of the corridor that also need to be addressed. So with that, we are embarking on this effort with great optimism. Broadway has a ton of potential that I think will really benefit the city. So we look forward to following this board's leadership on this initiative. So with that, Project Manager Sarah Mulder has a great presentation with lots of information to share with you all today.
Fantastic.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. Sarah Mulder, Project Manager for the CRA. And as Chris just alluded to, I'm here to give you a presentation on the CRA's overall strategy to address BMUD. Some of the things I'm going to go over is an overview of the corridor, some CRA priority items and recommendations, our next steps, CRA-owned properties, a schedule, and then we'll take any questions from you all. So I know you're all familiar, but to give you an overview of the study area, the Broadway corridor in relation to Curry Park, Pleasant City, the various neighborhoods on each side, Northwood Village, and the Industrial District. And I show you this slide to really show how important it is to include these neighborhoods in the entire process from beginning to end. There are several that are on each side of the corridor. As far as an overview of BMUD, mixed-use districts are a zoning type that allow both residential and non-residential uses that provide pedestrian connections. So the Broadway corridor is a linear, urban, pedestrian-oriented mixed-use district that runs from 25th Street to 59th Street. Some of the characteristics, there's established residential neighborhoods, some historic on both east and west of the corridor, a mix of businesses and religious establishments as well. Because of its complexity, unlike other areas, this type of mixed-use district will require different types of development regulations, with setbacks, lot configurations, parking requirements, and so on. I'm not going to go into this in real depth, but to give you an overview, this corridor has been worked on for several years, dating back to 2012, and most notably in 2014 when the CRA embarked on the North End Visioning Week, which was approved by the CRA board in April of 2014. I will come back to this plan often throughout this presentation as there was a lot of work that was done, and it's actually still very relevant today. So to give you an overview of the urban design analysis, so our main design objectives and everything that we're doing here is to improve the walkability and safety on the roadway, improve and stabilize the adjacent neighborhoods and most specifically those historic structures, and to encourage redevelopment. And as part of that North End Visioning Plan, the corridor was broken into 3 zones. I'm just going to go over these with you. Zone 1, 25th Street to 40th Street, is mainly multifamily residential with some mixed uses. We envision this area to be more conducive for multifamily and boutique hotels with landscaping and on-street parking. This area has deep lot depths, and we see that the redevelopment along this section is most feasible of all of these zones. Then Zone 2 is 40th Street to 47th Street, which is mainly mixed-use development, and we're going to focus on some key intersections, including 40th and 45th Street as nodes for redevelopment. And then Zone 3, 47th Street to 59th Street, mainly commercial uses. And in this area, we're going to work with Rybovich and the Economic Development Department to try to attract some marine-related uses to this area. This is the biggest area of concern for us because of the uneven property boundaries that causes the unattractive encroachment into those historic neighborhoods, as I mentioned earlier. An overview of the current conditions, I know you're all very familiar with this, is the insufficient parking, destabilized existing historical structures, crime and safety issues, vacancies, irregular lot depth, poor street frontage, the insufficient buffering between the commercial and residential uses, specifically in Zone 3, high-speed traffic, narrow sidewalks, insufficient landscaping, etc. But I don't want to harp on that because although there are a lot of issues, there are also a lot of strengths and opportunities that we have here, including the fact that there are so many vacant parcels available for redevelopment, the amount of, the number of port users and area employees within the vicinity, and other things. So with that, I'm going to go into sort of what our next steps are and our priority recommendations that we'd like to hear some feedback from you all. Currently underway, we are working with zoning to address changes to BMUD to encourage redevelopment. We do have a scope of work drafted. I'm going to get into all of these in a little bit more detail. We're also working with the ULI team on a study of the corridor, and we're working with engineering on roadway improvements, as Chris mentioned in the beginning. We're also looking at some strategic property acquisition, hosting a banker-broker developer event, and then ongoing marketing, branding, and incentives. So as I mentioned, the scope of work for the BMUD RFP, our goal is to create updated regulating plans and diagrams that address the land development regulations, building placement, those historic districts and properties that are adjacent to BMUD, streetscape, and other things, as you see listed here. We have budgeted $150,000 for this effort. This will be collaborative between all of those neighborhoods on that slide, that first slide that I showed you, the stakeholders involved, the businesses and property owners, as well as planning, zoning, and engineering. And then we are going to incorporate the following guiding visions into the RFP. All of these came out of that North End Visioning Plan and are still very relevant. The first one for Zone 1 is we want to look at creating a better streetscape that creates slower traffic and encourages residential development, and those are some images there for you to see. And as I mentioned, engineering is already working on this. Zone 2, we're looking at secondary access ways for residential areas, appropriate buffering between uses, the commercial and residential, and then dual frontages to provide natural surveillance. And then finally, Zone 3, we're looking for to do landscape medians, reduced lane widths, and then continuous landscaping along the corridor, as well as the establishment of minimum setbacks. So we are working with the Urban Land Institute, which is one of the oldest and largest network of cross-disciplinary real estate and land use experts. So as part of their Leadership Institute 2022 leadership project, they chose Broadway to look at the land use analysis and recommendations. And they're going to do some research and due diligence and provide us some recommendations at no charge. So that's great, and we'll be hearing from them soon. And I'm not going to get into much of this, as you all are familiar that there will be some planned roadway modifications that the city engineering department is working on. We are working closely with them to make sure that everything we're doing lines with this as well. And then I'm going to introduce Robert Traeger, our real estate manager, to go over our strategic property acquisition strategy. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Rob Traeger, the real estate manager for the Community Redevelopment Agency. So based on the strategic property acquisition, right now we currently have one property, as you guys are probably familiar with, 5706 Broadway. It's almost 1.2 acres in size. So the strategy, with acquisitions is to gain control with property acquisitions. When you have control over the land, you control, somewhat of what goes there. So that's kind of the strategy that we have seen and looking forward to implement. Contiguous properties to try to create north-south depths instead of east-west. As you're familiar with, the east-west depths are very shallow, and developers, obviously with parking requirements and setbacks, et cetera, really need, more depth than what's provided for. So if you can, create depths with north-south rather than east-west, that's a possibility. The only thing you would have to do is, the right-of-ways would maybe have to be shifted and shut off at some points. But I think that's something that we can look into with further acquisitions. I'll use this. So the 3-year strategy with our current acquisition budget would be to continue to acquire properties strategically along the corridor, and hopefully get contiguous properties so we can create that depth that we talked about. 25th to 40th Street being more of a residential, hopefully use in the future. 40 to 47th mixed use, and 47th to 59th Street commercial and mixed use. So the next steps with our current budget. Currently, we have $800,000 budgeted for fiscal year 2022. We currently have one property under contract, and then that'll leave us with another, monies to buy another 1 or 2 properties, most likely. One of the things we wanted to bring up today and ask for your guidance and consideration is a bond issuance for property acquisitions. We haven't really dived into the details of this, but we wanted to kind of get your direction today about the next steps to try to do this. A bond would allow us to substantially increase the property acquisition budget and allow the CRA to gain control with more property acquisitions and build more of those contiguous lots that we talked about to spur development at a much faster pace and scale. So, we have seen a lot of interest from developers. It's just a question of making this a reality. And strategic acquisition is fine. It's just, it depends on a lot of factors, which some of the things we don't have control over, property owners, sellers, et cetera. So if we could increase our property acquisition budget, that would allow us to gain more access to properties and have more control to spur our redevelopment efforts. So appreciate your time today, and I'm going to bring up Alexa Cray to talk about our marketing strategy for the Broadway corridor.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning,
Morning.
Commissioners. Alexa Cray, Marketing Coordinator for the Community Redevelopment Agency. So something exciting we have coming up that I know Sarah touched on briefly is the Banker Broker Developer event. Now, this is something we'll be putting on to showcase the development opportunities, vacancies, North End projects, available real estate and business opportunities, and so much more in the along the Broadway corridor and the North End as a whole. And we'll be looking at having that event in May, so that's coming up quick. Now, getting into the marketing strategy, one of our main focuses, a couple of them anyways, will be the community collation, which is to encourage more interaction between the businesses and the residents. We hope to do this through conducting a series of focus groups and surveys with the businesses and residents to identify merchandising mixes and issues related to the existing businesses. We'll be providing CRA updates at local neighborhood association meetings, and we'd like to partner with local organizations such as RISE to facilitate a relationship between the businesses and the residents. Next, we'll be focusing on Broadway Business Association. This will be to kind of form an association that would provide a collective voice for the businesses along Broadway, similar to the business association that we have in Northwood Village. So we would facilitate the initial startup of this program, and we would do that through canvassing of the Broadway area to also work with local organizations to create a contact database of the merchants, not only to connect them to the CRA, but also to connect them with each other. And we hope to, in the future, host networking and mixer events for those businesses. We'll also be establishing a digital presence. This would be to create Broadway digital platforms such as a website, social media. We would be looking to include local updates in the digital newsletter, and we would be utilizing city media to promote relevant campaigns. Continuing with that, we'll have a focus on economic development, which would increase the awareness of the existing businesses along the corridor. We would do this by hosting business expos and community resource fairs. We'd like to feature local businesses in business spotlight campaigns and create a shop local campaign for the North End, as well as encouraging and promoting businesses and promotions and discounts. Then lastly, we have business attraction, which would be to strategically attract new businesses to the Broadway corridor. We would do this through targeting businesses that complement the existing business mix. We'd also be hosting our banker broker developer event, as mentioned previously. We would like to create a unique brand for the Broadway corridor and modify the message and reputation that Broadway has using public relations and marketing strategies. Okay, I'll bring Sarah Mulder back up.
Thank you. So with that, this just gives you a rough idea of the schedule that we're looking at. February, we're hoping to have legal draft the RFP. ULI should also be presenting the studies of their findings, and then hopefully releasing the RFP sometime in March with a contractor on board in April. And then sometime in April or May, we're hoping to host that North End banker broker developer event. And then with that, we will take any questions you have, and I will bring back up the slide with our overall recommendations for you all to have in front of you.
Thank you. While you're looking for that slide, I would like to address the question of a bond for property acquisition. I would certainly be in favor of that. So whatever, Mr. Rugg, whatever steps you need to take to come back with more specific recommendations, the amount of the bond, what funds would be used to repay the bond, blah, blah, blah. And I know it'll take some time to work things out with legal, but I would certainly like to see that process initiated and come back to this board with a more specific, defined recommendation. But I would certainly be in favor of that. And I think the time is right now. If we can go out there and start acquiring some of these properties, and it will position us to be strategic as we're dealing with developers going forward. So that's just one board member's
Excellent.
point.
Oh, that's helpful, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, let's dive into any other questions, comments from board members. Commissioner Schoaf.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you very much to CRA and staff for bringing this forward. Certainly something that, as the district commissioner, I'm very, very interested in. Mayor, thanks for your support in a bond. Certainly something I'm incredibly supportive of as well. Part of the thing that we suffer from on Broadway is having someone to move first. And I think the more that we can work in tandem of gaining control and putting our dollars into that particular corridor, as well as creating market conditions that attract the private sector. And I think that second point is keenly important to me. And I know we're going to get to the complete engagement on BMUD, and we have a lot of residents that are out and really ready to engage in that. I think what's important, and I'll plant the seed now, is to be a little more creative. I am not a city planner, but I hear a lot of feedback from the neighborhoods and what they'd like to see. And, you know, I know throughout Old Northwood, we have street closures that have closed off to Broadway and created major intersections. We have a roadway plan that's slated to come before us that emphasizes safe crosswalks at these major intersections, 25th, 36th, 44th, 45th, et cetera, up and down the line. And so, you know, maybe there's a way to use our development to create the same environment by closing off some of the roadways with the buildings. So stressing those north-south plots and getting them to be contiguous by giving up the city right-of-way to the roadway, provided that that building creates a paseo or a coffee shop or something that goes adjacent to the residential neighborhood, so that in essence we can use our development to create a safer streetway. Certainly it has had an improvement. The proof is in concept of what has occurred in Old Northwood, that it has been helpful to crime deterrent and property values. And so I think if we can look at it from that creative strategy of trying to use the development to benefit the entire neighborhood, there's certainly a path forward there. I think as we go forward too, and Sarah, you alluded to this as well, the neighborhood engagement is pivotal here. I have stressed for a very long time the concept of one Broadway. So many times we find ourselves fighting east of Broadway, west of Broadway, when Broadway is one street. And so I think it's really, really important to engage up and down the corridor to gauge what the neighbors would like to see. On one side, we have a declared historic district. On the other side, we have a non-declared historic district, when in essence the buildings are the same age. So it's really about what the neighbors would like to see. Certainly, there's a huge appetite for improvement as we go along. So really appreciate the support of this board, the CRA advisory board certainly, and so many neighborhood groups that have been involved here. And looking forward to keeping this moving forward. So thank you.
Any other questions, observations, comments? Okay. Mr. Rue?
I did want to extend an invitation to any board members that if at any point you'd like to take an individual ride around the CRA boundaries up in that area, there are a lot of nooks and crannies, so to speak, that I think are important. It's great that we're looking at this high-level overview, but when you really start understanding some of the details, it really starts illustrating not only the challenges, but also a lot of the opportunities and benefits that this corridor can have. I think specifically with the connection of the intercoastal, which is very, very close to this corridor and can offer to be sort of that really great amenity that you can't find in many other places, in addition to our, obviously, the rich neighborhoods that line the corridor as well. So I just want to extend that invitation. If at any point you just want to hop in a city vehicle and take a ride around the corridor, I think it is worth a quick 30 to 60-minute car ride, and I'm happy to go with you to really show you some of those finer details to really illustrate the overall project.
I think that's a great idea, a good suggestion. Chris, are we also doing an assessment of public transportation options up and down the corridor? With a discussion, a hard look at the Palm Trans schedule and how that could be folded into our plans.
Of course, Palm Tran, trolleys, obviously, we have the blue line that runs up around the Northwood Village area, the anchor site, Curry Park, and also we're working with the planning department on the Northwood Road extension. All of these things, even down to having some type of bike sharing amenity up in the North End area, it's really important to look at all of those transportation items holistically that are also part of the overall planning of this effort. So we'll have more details relative to those, but right now we're just mostly trying to get an idea of the zoning, and then we can fill in a lot of these other details as we go along with the BMUD planning.
Yeah, because if we start putting some residential further north, we need to make sure we have folded in or having some conversations about transportation, public transportation options, whether it's, looking at moving our trolleys further north up there so that as folks reside in that area, we have thought about how they would get back and forth to work, which may be more of our those work opportunities will probably be more in our downtown corridor, and or it may go further north to Rybovich. But anyway, so let's just make sure we have factored that into our conversation as we have these discussions. Commissioner Lambert.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for this presentation. I just wanted to say that it's wonderful to see such a concentrated effort on moving this project forward, or these efforts forward, and also to see the community outreach. I most definitely support the CRA going out to get the bond. I think that it's important that the CRA show that we are also investing in this area to spur development, and I look forward to future conversations on that. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Anything else for the good of the body? All right, hearing none, thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate it. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.